Hello again, and this is session 5 of the series of sessions on the short story. In this part of the course, we're going to do together the short story element of point of view. The short story element of point of view is covered in Unit 5. So this session corresponds to Unit 5 in your book. Before we get started, let me share with you how I intend to cover this session. We're going to divide the session into three parts. The first part is going to be theory. I'm going to provide you with insights into what point of view means, the different points of view that we have. And then when we're done with that, with the unpacking the concept of point of view and talking about its different types and kinds and how important it is for the short story, we're going to move on after that to the second part of the session, which is going to be applying the concepts of part A or part 1 in session 5 to the short story. We'll have a short story in the second part, which is Arabic by James Joyce. We're going to try to apply the point of view concepts to it. After we're done with that, we're going to move to the third part of the session, which is going to be also addressing or discussing another short story, which is The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. And in this part of the session, we're going to also apply the concepts of point of view to it and see how far the concepts or the ideas presented in the short story coincide with what we have been saying about point of view and point of view relevant issues. Let me head straight to part 1 of session 5. Now I want you to move all the way to page 103. Page 103 is where you will have marks the start of unit 5. So this is unit 5 again. Focus on point of view, and this is the mirror of the unit. Let me talk to you about the the sections that we have on the mirror on page 1-3, and then we head straight to the theoretical part like I promised you. So the unit sections, you have section 1, background information. The items that we have under background information are the storyteller. We're going to talk about story, the short story as pure storytelling and the role of the storyteller, whether the storyteller, storytellers are identical or they differ, and if they differ, how they differ. And then when we're done with the storyteller, we're going to move to what is point of view. We're going to give you a definition of point of view, what it means and what it entails. And then the different kinds of narrators. We're going to talk about the different kind of narrators. We're going to have the first person narrator, the third person, whether the third person is omniscient or limited omniscient, and then we're going to move to the objective narrator, and after that we're going to end up with the unreliable narrator and stuff like that. This is section 1, and when we're done with section 1, we're going to section 2. We're going to go to section 2, which corresponds to part 2 of session 5, which is the read part. The read part here prompts you to read a featured short story, and the short story that we have featured is Arabic by James Joyce. Like I always do, I'm going to start with some kind of introduction about James Joyce himself and his place in the history of European literature. And then after that, we're going to follow that with the short story itself, and we'll start talking about the ideas coming out of it with, of course, very special reference to and focus on point of view in it. When we're done with that, we're going to move to exercises and activity, which is normally we don't have this. Yeah, it's not a very clear-cut part where we stop and start talking about the questions. The questions here take the form of discussions that we normally have and that the action normally prompts. And then you have section 4, which is featuring another short story. And the other short story that we have here is The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. We spoke about Edgar Allan Poe before. This was like session 1. We spoke about him, and when we mention him, this triggers thoughts and ideas of cliffhanging situations, unresolved murders, mystery, and okay. We'll talk about Edgar Allan Poe, the man, the literary figure, and then we are going to read together the short story and try to apply the, apply relevant point of view issues to it. This is followed again by exercises and activities, section 5, and then we're going to wrap this all up with the rounding up section, which is section 6, where new terms are presented, and then the list of like you have a checklist and you check against which you check whether you have covered all the items stipulated in the unit or not. So you're trying to make sure that nothing goes unconsidered, and then the end would be previewing for the next unit. Again, the objectives of the unit are first of all to illustrate the importance of point of view in a story, and then describe the different possible narrators in a short story, and this is going to be followed by exploring how the point of view affects the meaning of the story in 2 short stories. And of course, the 2 short stories that we're referring to here are Araby by James Joyce and The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. Let's head start to the we're doing the first part of the 3-part session that we have in session 5. Let's start with the storytelling. Basically, a short story is about storytelling. So you have, and this of course entails having a storyteller. Okay, so if you have a story, you need to have a teller of the story. For our purposes, from now on we're going to use the word narrator. You're going to hear the word narrator more often than not from this point forward, okay? Which is a replacement of the word teller. It's the technical word that we use for a teller. So the teller of a story is the narrator of a story, and we need right from the very beginning to make this distinction between the narrator of a story or a piece of fiction and the author. I don't want you to mix between the two, okay? I want you to it is true that you have that the author is the creator of the narrator, and he can be the narrator himself, but I want you to believe that they are 2 distinctive entities. The 2 of them are separate from each other, okay? So I want you to suspend your disbelief in the idea that they are 2, okay? So you might be saying that the author is the one who creates the short story, so the narrator is the author, okay? So when I come and tell you no, they are 2 separate things, you are in disbelief, you don't believe me. I want you to suspend that, okay, and act as if they are 2 separate entities. They have to. In the best interest of the reader, we have to make this distinction, okay? In order for us to have, varieties of narrators, as we're going to see. Otherwise, it's going to be all the author, speaking directly. You don't have different, like I'm telling them, you don't have scope and you don't have different varieties. It's going to be more or less autobiographical. The author is telling you straight about his own experience, and he's giving you things from his own perspective all the time. And of course, this is not literature. So again, we're talking about the storyteller. We're saying that if you have a short story or a story, this entails having a teller, and we have, now we're not using the word storyteller, we're using the word narrator. And we're making that distinction between the narrator of the short story and the author, two different and separate entities. Okay, so do you think a narrator or a teller of a story is important? Yeah, common sensically, yes. The narrator is very important. Otherwise, it's obviously a story cannot relate, cannot auto-relate. It cannot relate itself. It needs somebody to narrate it. So the narrator is very important for the existence of a short story, okay? So do you think that if we're talking about like a story, and we have 2 or 3 people telling us the story, do you think that their narrative is going to be identical? They are going to be saying the same thing in terms of the amount of information that they are going to provide, in terms of the perspective that they are that they will try to communicate to us, in terms of the worldviews? The answer is no. Okay, so you have different perspectives. Narrators differ based on their background, based on their demographics, whether they are like children or adults or elderly people. Okay, and we have a very clear example. If you happen to have like a fire, there was, let's assume that there was a fire, and you have like 50 people witnessing the fire. Okay, so what do you think that the reaction would be if they are given the opportunity to like narrate and recount what happens? Do you think that the 50 are going to be identical in their rendering of the accident? Do you think that the child who was there when the fire started is going to give the same amount of information that the elderly person would give? Do you think that the young adult, for example, who is involved, he is a witness and also part of the fire, do you think that his world view is going to coincide with that of the elderly? Obviously, the answer is no. So you're going to have different accounts of the fire, okay? And in spite of the fact that the fire is the same and the consequences and the results of the fire are the same, but the reaction to the fire, which is going to translate into different accounts, are going to be different, okay? So again, so when people, when 2 or 3 or 5 people are telling the same story, they are going to differ a great deal in their perspective, the perspectives that they give, which is based on their background, on how they look on life, on their their education and their level of awareness. Okay, so again, different. If you have like a story and you happen to have different narrators, you have different rendering of the story, different perspectives, okay? And these different perspectives are very important, okay? Because depending on the perspective, depending on how the narrator tells you the story and narrates it to you, you base, as a reader, you base your reaction to events, to the setting, to the characters, okay? So it is important that you have a narrator, and when he tells the narrator, he or she would affect your understanding of the short story, the messages that you're likely to receive reading the short story. Okay, let's now move to, again, we spoke about narrators, and we said that it is very important that you have a narrator. And we said that narrators differ in the rendering of the events depending on their demographics and age groups, depending on how close they are to the story or to the incident. Okay, sometimes you have a narrator who is so very much involved in the events. The narrator can be one of the characters of the short story, speaking in the I, using the I. Okay, so which means that he or she is actively involved. He is part of the narrative. He is part of the story. He is one of the characters. He can be a major or a main character. He can also be a minor character. Okay, so when you have a character, the narrator as one of the characters who is directly involved in the action and what happens, you normally have things and events rendered from his perspective, from his angle of vision. Okay, so when you have this kind of narrator who is first person using the I kind of thing, you have limited access to the other characters. We see things, like I said, from his vantage point, but it's a limited kind of perspective that he is giving. He is not allowed access to the minds and the feelings of the other characters. We see things from his perspective, but it's a limited kind of vision that he is giving us. Okay, but this is what we call the first person narrative. Okay, so where you have limited access to the different characters. You only have access to the narrator, the first person narrator himself, and to his thoughts and reactions to some of the characters. You shouldn't be, for example, and you also shouldn't take whatever he or she, the narrator, says. You need to take whatever he or she says with a grain of salt. You need to read and reread, and you don't trust him or her with ready-made judgments about the characters. You need, because like I'm telling you, he himself is very limited. Okay, this is what we call the first person point of view, and then you have what we call the third person point of view. The third person point of view, or the third person narrator, is someone, first of all, clues as how you can identify this kind of narrative. The third person narrative, you normally, or point of view, normally have pronounced like he and she and they. Okay, so you don't have the I anymore. This is what we call the third person point of view. And when we talk about the third person point of view, you have somebody who is outside the narrative. He's not part of the narrative. He's not one, I mean, the narrator in the third person point of view is not one of the characters. Okay? So you have two kinds of third person point of view. You can have the omniscient third person narrative or point of view, and you can have the limited omniscient third person point of view or narrative. With the omniscient, you have the word omniscient in itself is very revelatory of the role that the third person point of view omniscient narrator plays. He is all seeing, all knowing. Okay, he has complete access to the different characters, their feelings, their views of life. Okay, so with the third person omniscient narrator or narrator, you have complete access to the minds of the different characters. Okay, and then you have the limited omniscient third person point of view, where I'm saying limited because the narrator here is not given free access to all the characters. He focuses on one of the characters and he gives us his and the narrator gives us the allows free access to this character, his mind and soul, his feelings and ideas and thoughts. Okay. This is what we call the third person point of view with its two different types. And then after that you have what we call the objective point of view, or the detached, distant or impersonal observer. So again, this is objective. Objective means that we're not given it's objective, and objectivity means that the narrator, if any, is not taking sides. In a short story like that, you have action and dialogues and conversations are very dominant, and it is through reading them, you can figure out what kind of characters you have. You can react to the setting and to the characters and the events through the dialogues and the conversations and the actions. Okay, so you don't have direct authorial voice. You don't have a narrator who is giving you free access to the different characters. No, you need to come up with your own conclusions unaided, completely unaided, because this is objective narrative. Okay, this is objective point of view. And then you have the unreliable narrator, and it's if you think of the term that will be unreliable, it means that you cannot or you should not trust the perspectives of the narrator in this kind of narrative or in this kind of point of view. The narrator is not trustworthy or reliable, in the sense that he is deceiving. He can be deceitful, he can be deceived himself, delusional, okay, he can be mad, okay, he can be a lot of things, okay, so you cannot trust him or her with the narrative. You cannot take whatever they say for granted. You need to question that, okay. So, and you normally come to the realization that your narrator in this case is unreliable towards the end of the short story, okay. So a recommendation here would be to go all the way back and read the short story again with this new awareness, this new insight that the narrator that you have trusted for so long is unreliable, okay, because he is mad, because he is delusional, because he is deceived or deceiving, okay. And these are the different points of view that we have, and we're going to now apply or look for them in different parts of different short stories, and we're going to focus on what kind of point of view we have as seen through the passages or the parts of the passage that we're going to have. We're going to have 4 snapshots of short stories, and we're going to, like I said, explore the different points of view in them. We're going to have to build a fire, which is something that we have done before. We're going to have an extract from it, To Build a Fire by Jack London. We're going to have an extract taken from Doris Lessing's A Mild Attack of Locusts. We're going to have The Killers, part of The Killers by Ernest Hemingway, and we're going to conclude this with part of a very familiar short story now, which is the short story is A Letter from Gaza by Ghassan Kanafani. I will read them. I'll read them one at a time, and then try to identify what kind of point of view we have. So To Build a Fire, I'm going to read the extract and then highlight the point of view aspect in it. Okay, I want you to try to discover that. I want you to try to figure it out yourself, out of the my reading. This happens to be page 105 if you happen to have the book. So To Build a Fire, I'm reading the part that we're referring to. So To Build a Fire by Jack London. So then the man drowsed off into what seemed to him the most comfortable and satisfying sleep he had ever known. The dog sat facing and waiting. The brief day drew to a close in a long, slow twilight. There were no signs of a fire to be made, and besides, never in the dog's experience had it known a man to sit like that in the snow and make no fire. As the twilight drew on, its eager yearning for the fire mastered it, and with a great lifting and shifting of 4 feet, it whined softly, then flattened out its ears down in anticipation of being chidden by the man. But the man remained silent. Later the dog whined loudly, and still later it crept close to the man and caught the scent of death. This made the animal bristle and back away. A little longer it delayed, howling under the stars that leaped and danced and shone brightly in the whole sky. Then it turned and trotted up the trail in the direction of the camp it knew, where were the other food providers and fire providers. Okay, so come to think of it. So in terms of the visual clues that can tell you right away what kind of point of view we have. So look at the pronouns used. So the pronouns used are him. The pronouns used are it in referring to the dog. The pronouns used are he in reference to the unnamed protagonist in To Build a Fire. This can give you an indication that we are in, not a first, we're going to exclude first person narrative or point of view because you don't have I and we, right? So it's, and obviously we have nothing that indicate to us that the narrator is, for example, unreliable. Okay, so we're going to also exclude that. Okay, so we end up having the third person point of view. Okay, so the decision now, based on the clues, based on what we have, the decision now is to see or to say whether this third person narrative or point of view is omniscient or limited or omniscient. So obviously you have, let's first of all talk about what we have and then come up with a conclusion. So if you look again at the passage, you're going to see that we have what seems to be free access to the mind of the protagonist, who is now in a very bad shape. The fact that he tried to start the fire and it didn't work out because of his lack of experience. Okay, so now the situation is like that. So you have the protagonist dying, and you have the dog taking some time to realize that his owner or its owner is dying. So immediately before the protagonist dies, he is like preparing himself psychologically. Okay, and we're given this by the narrator. Okay, so the narrator is given free access and complete access to the mind of the protagonist. When we have, then the man drowsed off into what seemed to him. Okay, this is going into the mind of the character and trying to see what he thinks of. So what he is now preoccupied with is a feeling, the most comfortable and satisfying, the sleep that he is in, for the sleep, the eternal sleep, the fact that he is dying. So the narrator is telling that us that he seems to be preparing for the most comfortable and satisfying sleep he had ever known. This is going straight into the mind and the thoughts of the protagonist. Okay, and then we have the reaction of the dog to that. The dog is very stunned. This is a new experience. He's seeing somebody who is almost dying and is doing nothing for it. Even out of defense mechanism. The dog is mesmerized. He doesn't know what is happening. The man is dying and he's not reacting even to that. He's not doing anything. So we're also given free access to the dog. So let's assume that the dog is, just remember we said that characters, a dog, animals can be characters, and this is what is happening here. The dog is one of the characters in To Build a Fire. So we're also given free access to the mind of the dog and how he reacts to what he is seeing now. Obviously, he is very, the dog is very astonished at the peacefulness of the protagonist. Obviously, the protagonist, after having exhausted all the possible means, he is preparing for the idea of death. This is so again we have free access to the different, free unlimited access to the different characters in the short story, and this qualifies it as what kind of narrative or what kind of point of view. It's third person omniscient point of view. So it's omniscient. So you have an omniscient narrator here. He has complete access to that characters. Let's move to another part of another short story. You have, like I told you, A Mild Attack of Locusts by Doris Lessing. I'm going to read it out again, and then we see how it goes. So the rains that year were good. They were coming nicely just as the crops needed them, or so Margaret gathered when the men said they were not too bad. She never had an opinion of her own on matters like the weather, because even to know about what seems a simple thing like the weather needs experience, which Margaret had not got. The men were Richard, her husband, and old Stephen, Richard's father, a farmer from way back, and these two might argue for hours whether the rains were ruinous or just ordinary exasperating. Margaret had been on the farm 3 years. She still did not understand how they did not go bankrupt altogether. When the men never had a good word for the weather or the soil or the government, but she was getting to learn the language. Okay? If you read it again, if you think about it, you're going to come to the, let's look at the visual clues again. So what kind of pronouns we're having here? Obviously we have they, we have she, right? We have him and he, right? Which makes first person narrative out of the question. So you don't have first person narrative because you don't have, obviously you don't have I and we. So you have third person narrative. Okay, so you need to decide whether it is omniscient, having free access to the minds and souls and thoughts of all the characters, or limited omniscient, where you have limited access to the character, only one character. So if you think that this is limited omniscient point of view, you are correct. So obviously we're not given free access to all the characters. We're given only the only access that we are allowed is into Margaret, okay, one of the characters, and how we look at things from her own perspective. Okay, so this is limited omniscient narrator. And of course we have examples. When he says, he mentions, quite in passing, Richard, her husband, and old Stephen, her husband's father. Okay, but the discussions that they normally engage in on crops and the weather and stuff like that. Okay, but these pieces of information are rendered from the perspective and the vantage point and the point of view of Margaret. Okay, so we're given free access, unlimited access to Margaret's thoughts and mind, and through her we can have assessments of the other characters. But are we given access to the other characters' minds and see how they think? No, it is only through Margaret. Okay, and even when we get to know about her husband Richard, he is referred to as her husband. Okay, so everything is seen through this character, through the character of Margaret. Okay, this is what we call limited omniscient point of view. And now let's move to the third snapshot of a short story that we have. We have The Killers by Ernest Hemingway, and this is what we call the camera point of view. The camera point of view, or the camera technique or style, is that which does not the narrator does not engage in a lot of talk about the characters, taking labels and telling you about his own judgment about this character or that one. He or she is holding a camera, and he is following and shooting the action, and is recording the dialogues of the characters, which means that he is posing as an objective narrator. He does not interfere. You don't have authorial voice. You don't have the narrator interfering into the action in order to tell you about what kind of characters we have. We don't have access to the minds and thoughts of the different characters. Okay, it is only through the dialogues. It is only through the conversations and the actions that we are allowed to figure out what kind of characters we have. Let me read this part in order to prove it. So again, The Killers by Ernest Hemingway. So the door of Henry's lunchroom opened and two men came in. They sat down at the counter. "What's yours?" George asked them. "I don't know," one of the men said. "What do you want to eat, Al?" "I don't know," said Al. "I don't know what I want to eat." Outside it was getting dark. The street light came on outside the window. The two men at the counter read the menu. From the other end of the counter, Nick Adams watched them. He had been talking to George when they came in. Okay, when you look at that, it's pure conversation or dialogue with very with a minimum of narrative intervention, narrative from from the narrator. The fact that the narrator is not interfering, he's presenting, and this is what we refer to also in short stories and fiction as the technique of showing, not telling. So the narrator is not telling us, he is showing us what happens, and it's up to us to come up with conclusions about the different characters. So we're not having any free access to any of the characters. It is through their actions, through their dialogues, that we come up with conclusions about them, that we can get to know more about. This is again, this is the style or the technique of the camera, and obviously Ernest Hemingway is famous for that. This is so again, the point of view that we have adopted here is the detached observer point of view. Okay, the objective, the objective narrator who does not interfere in the action, who does not have access or would not allow himself to have access to the minds of none of the characters. Okay, and then we're going to end up this part with the fourth extract from a very familiar short story, which is A Letter from Gaza by Ghassan Kanafani. Let me read it, and then let's identify what kind of point of view presented here. So again, I'm reading. "So no, my friend, I won't come to Sacramento, and I have no regrets. No, and nor will I finish what we began together in childhood. This obscure feeling that you had as you left Gaza, this small feeling must grow into a giant deep within you. It must expand. You must seek it in order to find yourself here among the ugly debris of defeat. I won't come to you, but you return to us. Come back to learn from Nadia's leg, amputated from the top of the thigh, what life is and what existence is worth. See? Come back, my friend. We are all waiting for you." So again, looking for visual clues at what kind of point of view we have. So the pronouns that we are having here are I, see, you, us. Okay, so when you have I, obviously you have first person narrative or first person point of view, and when you have first person point of view, you don't have complete access to all the characters. You see, you only have access to the character of the first person narrator. Okay, and it is through his perspective that we look on and at the events around him or her. Okay, and this is happening here. So we're talking about the narrator, the one who is sending the letter to his friend Mustafa in California. And this is also part of the whole short story. We have done it, and you get to know that, again, we're seeing things from the perspective of this first person narrator. And if you still remember, his ideas about Gaza and how it was to him like a big prison, and how bad it felt to live there under the Israeli occupation. See, this was, of course, if you still remember, there was this change of heart upon his part when he saw his niece Nadia, and when he considered her big sacrifice. Again, if you focus on this part and assume that we hadn't read the short story, we're going to find out that we have first person point of view, where the I and we and us pronouns feature very prominently in it. Okay, and from that we're going to find that we have limited access to the characters. We don't even have access to any of the characters except for the narrator himself, and it is through the narrator that we get to know about the events, that we get to know about how he sees them and how he looks on them. Okay, this is again a letter from Gaza is an example of first person point of view, where the I and we pronouns are featuring very prominently, and again this allows us limited access to the to what happens in the short story, to the minds of the character. We don't have this free access to the characters. So obviously with this we come to the end of part 1 of session 5. Thank you very much and goodbye.